It was a bright and sunny afternoon on July 1989 when United Airlines Flight 232 prepared for departure from Denver, Colorado. The passengers boarded the McDonnell Douglas DC-10, a wide-body, long-haul aircraft, unaware that their lives were about to be tested in ways few could imagine. Among the 296 souls on board were families traveling for vacations, business travelers returning home, and a handful of children excitedly staring out the windows at the clouds below. In the cockpit sat Captain Al Haynes, a seasoned pilot with decades of flying experience. Calm, confident, and meticulous, Haynes had seen his share of turbulence and emergencies in the air, but nothing could prepare him for the ordeal ahead. Alongside him were First Officer William Record, steady and dependable, and Flight Engineer Dudley Dvorak, whose technical expertise would soon prove invaluable. Together they had flown countless hours and shared an unspoken trust, the kind that forms among people who work in life-or-death environments. The aircraft taxied to the runway, engines humming steadily. Flight attendants moved gracefully down the aisles, assisting passengers with seatbelts and safety instructions. Overhead compartments were securely latched, and passengers settled in, some reading, some quietly chatting, and others dozing in preparation for the flight to Chicago. The summer afternoon air was warm, the skies clear, and the takeoff was smooth. As Flight 232 climbed steadily to its cruising altitude of 37,000 feet, the passengers began to relax. Drinks were served, small conversations resumed, and the hum of the engines became a comforting background noise. The flight seemed routine, unremarkable, just another cross-country trip. But high above the Rocky Mountains, a catastrophic event was silently brewing. At precisely 3:16 p.m., a loud, jarring explosion echoed through the aircraft. It was sudden, deafening, and terrifying. Alarms blared in the cockpit, red warning lights flashed, and the fuselage shuddered violently. The passengers were thrown into panic as the plane shook uncontrollably. The tail-mounted engine had suffered a catastrophic failure. Its disintegration was not just mechanical, it was devastatingly destructive. Shrapnel tore through the fuselage and severed all three of the aircraft's hydraulic systems, which controlled the plane's flight surfaces: the rudder, elevators, and aileron. In essence, Flight 232 had lost all conventional means of control. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere shifted instantly from routine to crisis. Captain Haynes, First Officer Records, and Flight Engineer Dvorak immediately assessed the situation. Their instruments were warning of impending disaster. Without hydraulics, the aircraft could not be steered. The rudder was useless, the ailerons unresponsive, the brakes inoperable. The plane was now, in essence, gliding uncontrollably through the sky, vulnerable to every gust of wind, every turbulence, and every maneuver it had once responded to with precision. Despite the chaos, Captain Haynes maintained a calm and steady voice over the public address system. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have experienced a hydraulic failure. Please remain seated and fasten your seat belts." His tone was soothing, almost surreal, given the severity of the situation. Yet his composed words did little to alleviate the fear among the passengers. Mothers clutched their children tightly, fathers whispered prayers under their breath, and older passengers exchanged frightened glances. The sense of helplessness was palpable. While the crew in the cockpit grappled with the technical disaster, a beacon of hope emerged from an unexpected source. Among the passengers was Denny Fitch, a DC-10 flight instructor traveling as a passenger. Realizing the gravity of the situation, he volunteered his expertise to help the flight crew. An attendant guided Fitch to the cockpit, where he quickly assessed the dire circumstances. Fitch's presence brought a crucial glimmer of hope. He saw the instruments and understood immediately the plane could not be controlled by conventional means. But there was still one slim possibility. By carefully manipulating the thrust from the remaining two wing-mounted engines, the aircraft could be partially steered. It was a desperate, unconventional tactic, one never attempted in aviation history. Yet, in that moment, there was no other choice. Meanwhile, the passengers braced themselves for what might come. Children cried softly, elderly passengers gripped the armrests in silent fear, and flight attendants moved methodically through the aisles, providing guidance and reassurance. Some passengers quietly prayed, while others simply stared into the distance trying to comprehend the unfolding nightmare. As the aircraft continued its erratic flight, the cockpit team and Fitch began their tentative attempts to control it. Adjusting engine thrust to change direction felt unnatural and risky. The plane's massive weight and damaged systems made every small input a potential hazard. Yet the crew pressed on, understanding that the lives of everyone aboard rested entirely on their skill, courage, and teamwork. For the first hour after the explosion, Flight 232 became a surreal tableau of fear, hope, and determination. Above the clouds, the aircraft was a seemingly uncontrollable force of nature, yet within the cockpit, human ingenuity and bravery were mounting a counter-effort, however slim the chances. And so as the sun shone brightly over the Rocky Mountains, a flight that began as ordinary had transformed into a life-or-death struggle, one that would soon test every ounce of courage, skill, and resilience possessed by those aboard United Airlines Flight 232. The roar of the engines, once a steady hum of reassurance, now seemed almost sinister as Flight 232 battled the sky without control. The catastrophic failure of the tail engine had left the DC-10 flying like a giant, uncontrollable bird. Every gust of wind, every subtle shift of air threatened to send the plane into an irrecoverable spin. For the 296 passengers aboard, the ordinary hum of flight had transformed into a nightmare that no safety demonstration could prepare them for. Inside the cockpit, Captain Al Haynes, First Officer William Records, and Flight Engineer Dudley Dvorak worked frantically, coordinating with Denny Fitch, the off-duty flight instructor who had offered his expertise. Fitch's arrival had been a lifeline, someone who understood the DC-10 systems intimately and could offer insight into desperate, untested options. Together they devised a plan so risky it had never been attempted, to steer the aircraft using only the power of the two wing-mounted engines. One engine would throttle up to turn the plane in one direction, the other would reduce thrust to turn the other. It was crude, imprecise, and dangerous. But it was all they had. Outside the cockpit, the cabin was a place of tension, fear, and fragile hope. Flight attendants moved down the aisles, shouting instructions to brace for a rough landing, their calm voices a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding them. Mothers clutched children tightly, whispering soothing words, while fathers tried to mask their own terror with comforting gestures. Older passengers held each other's hands and silently prayed, many writing quick notes or messages to loved ones, unsure if they would survive the ordeal. The plane twisted and shuddered with every turn. Passengers described the violent banking, the sudden drops, and the terrifying lurches that sent belongings and sometimes even people sliding across the aisles. The DC-10, designed to be stable and powerful, now felt like a massive, unwieldy beast fighting against the sky. Yet in the cockpit, the teamwork was nothing short of extraordinary. Haynes, Records, Dvorak, and Fitch coordinated their every move with precision. Fitch adjusted the throttles, subtly increasing power on one wing engine while reducing it on the other. Haynes communicated with air traffic control, explaining the dire situation and requesting immediate clearance to land at Sioux City, Iowa, the nearest airport capable of accommodating the DC-10. Every second counted. The plane was heavy, fast, and unpredictable. For the passengers, the minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity. Each jolt and roll of the aircraft was met with gasps, prayers, and whispered reassurances. Flight attendants repeatedly instructed passengers to brace for impact, to keep seatbelts tight, and to maintain as much composure as possible. The fear in the cabin was palpable, yet mingled with a faint thread of hope, hope inspired by the pilots and Fitch's determination. The struggle in the cockpit became a battle against gravity itself. With every adjustment, the crew risked overcompensating, which could send the plane into a fatal spin. Yet they continued, moving with a combination of technical skill, intuition, and sheer willpower. Fitch's knowledge of the DC-10 systems proved invaluable. He suggested subtle throttle adjustments that allowed the aircraft to maintain a fragile balance, keeping it pointed toward the runway while preventing uncontrollable rolls or dives. As the plane approached Sioux City, the stakes could not have been higher. The massive DC-10, weighing hundreds of tons, was descending rapidly. With no hydraulic control, there was no way to slow down, deploy flaps, or use brakes effectively. The only hope of survival lay in the crew's ability to guide the plane to the runway using engine thrust alone. Each maneuver had to be flawless, yet the situation left little room for error. Inside the cabin, passengers clung to hope, prayer, and each other. Some held tightly to loved ones, whispering words of encouragement. Others stared silently, resigned to whatever fate awaited them. The flight attendants continued to perform their duties with courage and calm, their professionalism a beacon of stability amidst the terror. Captain Haynes and his team in the cockpit were aware of the limitations. They knew that even a perfectly guided approach might still result in a crash. Yet they persisted, refusing to give up, believing that with teamwork and ingenuity, they could bring the plane down safely enough to save lives. For the next 44 minutes, the DC-10 became a vessel of human resilience. Every jolt, every adjustment, every shouted instruction was a testament to the crew's courage, and although fear dominated the minds of the passengers, the determination in the cockpit offered a lifeline, a promise that survival was still possible. As Flight 232 neared Sioux City, the tension in the cabin escalated. The runway was in sight, but the aircraft's speed, weight, and limited control made landing a near impossible feat. The crew had guided the plane this far, but the final moments would determine who lived and who perished. And yet, amid the fear and chaos, a remarkable truth emerged. Teamwork, courage, and human ingenuity could defy the odds, even in the face of near certain disaster. Firefighters and rescue personnel arrived swiftly, dragging survivors from the wreckage, carrying the injured to safety, battling the threat. Amid the chaos, stories of heroism emerged. Flight attendants and ground crews at exits held infants and reassured terrified passengers. Strangers helped each other, forming human chains to move the injured away from danger. In the days that followed, Captain Haynes reflected on the events. Humble as ever, he stated, "We were just doing our job. What saved lives was teamwork and a little bit of grace." The crash of Flight 232 became a landmark event in aviation history. It prompted major changes in training, emphasizing crew resource management, CRM, the structured coordination of pilots, flight engineers, and cabin crew. Airlines worldwide adopted these lessons, recognizing that effective communication, teamwork, and calm under pressure can mean the difference between life and death. Survivors carried with them the memory of those final terrifying moments, the plane twisting and turning above the fields, the adrenaline of near-certain disaster, and the astonishing skill and courage of the crew that gave them a chance. Many reported that the calm voices of the pilots and flight attendants had been a lifeline, a guiding force through the storm of fear and uncertainty. Even decades later, the story of United Airlines Flight 232 serves as a testament to human resilience, courage, and cooperation. In the face of overwhelming odds, the crew demonstrated that leadership, skill, and teamwork can create miracles, even when the tools at hand seem hopelessly inadequate. Flight 232's legacy is not just in the statistics of survival, but in the human stories of courage, sacrifice, and heroism. A reminder that in moments of crisis, ordinary people can rise to extraordinary heights, and that even in the darkest hour, hope and determination can